Welcome to Marvel Vision, a podcast about Marvel, the MCU, and right now, X-Men 97. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
That was the smoothest intro we've done for the show so far, and we're going to be talking about Tolerance Is Extinction Part 2, Episode 9 on Disney Plus now. If you haven't checked it out, please do go watch it. We're going to get into spoilers, but broad overview here. After the end of the last episode, Magneto has EMP'd the entire world, shut down all electronics for the most part, other than Forge's leg and Bastion, and we get the X-Men splitting into two teams. The classic teams, the blue team and the gold team, going on two different missions. Meanwhile, in the midst of that, Magneto recruits Rogue and Sunspot, takes them into this reconstituted Asteroid M. So we get one team going after Magneto in Asteroid M to try to convince him to restart the magnetism of the Earth before it dies in 12 hours. Meanwhile, the other team is going after Bastion to stop him because they know if they convince Magneto, the Prime Sentinels are going to come back. So they got to do two things at once. Both teams run into, I guess we could conservatively call them hiccups, I would say.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Plans. Yeah, there you go. And the the big cliffhangers that we get are Jean Grey is potentially about to be killed by Cable, who has been activated by Sinister in his long-range plan. And then meanwhile, Wolverine, as we correctly predicted, gets his skeleton ripped out, or more specifically, the adamantium ripped out of his skeleton. Yeah. Wild blockbuster episode. I just want to start with the adamantium thing for 1 second, because I know
you want to start there. You want to start there.
Here's the only thing that I wanted to say is my reaction watching this episode. This show is making me feel very smart, because I watched the show and I'm like, I have accurately predicted something. And then I have this check in my head where I'm like, well, I accurately predicted it for two reasons. One, the plot is following a logical progression over the course of the show. And two, I have been reading X-Men comics for literal decades.
Well, but let me say, I think that's 100% right, and is a nice way of like tempering the fact that we're like, yeah, we nailed it. But I gotta say, I think often we have similar predictions that make logical sense, call on the great canon of comic book knowledge, and feel like super awesome things to bring to the screen, whether it's television, film, or an animated show like this. But most often the creators don't do it. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of this show is that they are like us. They have created a show that serves, that uses the underlying canon to great effect, and is not only just showing it, they're combining it in a way that makes it way more intense all the time.
Can I?
Yeah. La-di-da. You guys are super smart, and you predict.
No. That's the opposite of what I just said, literally. I also wanted to throw something out just based on what you're saying, Justin, because there's been a lot of discussion online, and I think we touched on this on the podcast before, where people are like, Bo DeMeo, showrunner of the show, writer of the show, got to bring you back. You got to be running X-Men on the big screen. Marvel has to rectify their mistake in firing you. What's going on? You're a genius. Here's a couple of things I want to say about this. Not to like make this very heavy right at the top here, but this has been like irking me a little bit, and irking me for a couple of reasons. One, we do not know why Bo DeMeo was fired. Maybe it was for righteous reasons. Maybe it was not. Whatever it is not for us to say. It's not for us to be like, twiddling our fingers, being like, oh man, I can't wait for the tea to come out. Because also we don't know what it is. It might be something awful. It might be something not so awful. Does not matter. That is behind the scenes drama. They let him go. I've seen other people compare this to the James Gunn situation. That is a different situation because that was very public facing. We knew exactly what James Gunn had tweeted out there. He apologized for it. And this was right at the beginning of the conservative mob going after people and understanding they could get people fired. So totally different situations, not comparable at all. But the bigger thing that irks me about this, which, frankly, to his credit, I think Bo DeMeo has been pretty open about, is this whole myth of the singular creator being like, Bo DeMeo did this on his own. He drew all the frames. He voiced all the characters. He went back in time like Cable and wrote all the X-Men comics. That's not what's happening here. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who worked on this stuff. They have based this, as we just talked about, very well on classic X-Men comic books and not so classic X-Men comic books. And
Yes,
that
great
is
call.
what is coming to bear in the show. It is not one man, it is a group effort of hundreds or thousands of people. So that's
And I think that's spot on. And I would also say this is perfect for this. But if this was the X-Men movie, I don't think it would work. It'd be too wonky. It'd be too like rooted in stuff that you have to really understand the underlying material to really enjoy to its fullest, or even sort of like feel all of it. I think we feel all of it because we do have so much of working knowledge and the working knowledge of the many seasons that came before this one. So like to say he could save the movies is, I think, wrong in a couple ways.
Plus, if this was a movie, think about all those, like how annoying it would be every 33 minutes you're getting that credit roll and you're like, oh man.
You get to hear the song more, Pete.
That's true. I'm glad. Let's bring it back to the opening credits. Let's talk about that magical feeling you get when you hear the music and get the opening credits. I'm still having a blast with it 8 or 9 episodes in, so it's a great feeling. I didn't have that feeling at the end of the episode, but I think at least we started in a great place.
Well, let me say one of my thoughts coming out of this was like, I feel like this whole show has been building up to just meet the dramatic power of the theme song. Like when in this episode, especially, the theme song hit harder. And I don't know if they like tuned it up a little bit.
Yeah,
but
they did hit harder.
This song it's so intense and dramatic. And when I was a kid, I was like, crazy. This is crazy. This is part of this. And then now I'm like, this is emotionally accurate. We're finally here where the song makes sense with everything that's come before.
Well, I'd throw it out there. This was something that struck me in this episode as well. The Newton brothers, who are doing the music for the show, it goes so hard across the board. The whole score is great, particularly every single time they pump up Storm's theme when she's like, wind and lightning, hear my call, and the tornadoes start and everything, and they do, I don't know, I'm not even going to try to do the theme that they do for Storm.
Sick NATO in
I'm
this
like, oh, this is great. And it just pays off on this premise that Storm's a great character anyway, but Storm is a Omega mutant. She is like beyond everything else, and that's what they get through with that musical theme.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, the intense drama, the original run of all these shows didn't have enough emotional underpinning to pay off. Plot-wise, it was always like, oh my god, everyone's so angsty and upset all the time, especially Wolverine.
Oh yeah.
But now they've given this new X-Men 97 has given the emotional underpinnings, and the music is such a strong reflection of that, and always has been. It's just working so well right now.
Do you remember when he stole Cyclops' motorcycle and just rode off with it?
Are you on like a Wolverine just nostalgia kick right now?
Because he died at the end of the end.
Yeah, that's all I have. And then my dreams are like ripped in front of me apart. So
he'll be fine with just bones.
It seemed like he was like his bones were liquefied and then ripped out of him. I don't know if he survived.
I can't tell how much of this is a joke. You know, you've read comics. You know what's happening to him here, right?
I mean, I don't know because this isn't a comic. This is a TV show, but I have ideas and I've read all the comics. So
okay, let's talk about this. This is, I guess, spoilers for what's coming forward because this is, again, not us predicting. This is literally what happened to the books. So,
well, but before you say it, though, let's say that also that we did call this in a nice way because we said Wolverine hasn't had the spotlight in this show. And it feels like what they're setting up for the next season and this next episode we're going to get is a full Wolverine journey.
100%.
That you're about to describe, Alex.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different things that they're doing at the same time here in this episode in particular. One of them is a no insult to the creators, particularly Fabian Nicieza, who we really like a lot. We've interviewed him a bunch. He's awesome. But he and Scott Lobdell did this crossover called Operation Zero Tolerance, which was the introduction of Bastion and the Prime Sentinels. It was crazy and all over the place, like a lot of 90s crossovers were. But The other thing that's being mixed in here is Fatal Attractions, which was another crossover by Fabian Nicieza and Scott Lobdell for the 30th anniversary of the X-Men comics. It picked up right after Jim Lee and Chris Claremont rebooted everything.
With the blue and gold teams that we get here.
Exactly. And the most iconic thing about it, I don't know about you guys, but the thing that I remember two things about Fatal Attractions. One is going into the comic book store and seeing they had hologram cards printed on the cover, and I was like, oh, sick. This is
sick hologram.
And that cost like
the technology. Oh, wow.
They were like $4.95, which back then was like $50. Like, okay.
Oh, I got to take out a loan.
Yeah.
This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Who cares what the story is? I need, like, rip off the cover and give that card to me. And then the other thing that happened is the thing that happens at the end of this episode, which is Magneto rips out Wolverine's adamantium from his skeleton. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about it on the podcast because I still think this is one of the funniest stories in comic books. Peter David, who incredible comic book writer, known for his runs on Hulk, X Factor, many other things. But at the time, in I think it was 96, I want to say, was writing X Factor, and they were planning this Fatal Attractions crossover. And X Factor got nothing to do, like literally nothing to do. I think there's an issue of X Factor in the crossover where none of the X Factor characters appear. It's just like Wolverine and Cable and I don't know, probably Bishop or somebody else like fighting, and that's pretty much it. So Peter David apparently was in the retreat where the X-Men writers were talking, and at the time they were planning as part of not Fatal Attractions, Operation Zero Tolerance. I apologize. So as part of Operation Zero Tolerance, they were planning on bringing Magneto back as a villain because he hadn't been a villain for a while and having a big Magneto-Wolverine fight. Peter David, apparently bored out of his mind because his title was getting nothing to do, was like, you know what? If I'm Magneto in that fight, what I do is I just rip out Wolverine's skeleton. He was 100% joking when he said that because his picture of it was kind of exactly what you're joking about, Justin. You rip out Wolverine's skeleton, he's a blob of flesh on the floor. That's literally it. He's dead. And everybody was like, no, that's a great idea. Let's do that. He's like, what are you talking about? That's a stupid idea. Do not do that. And they ended up not bringing back Magneto as the villain for Operation Zero Tolerance. They did the next year. Again, had my dates totally wrong. That was 97. This was 98. So in 98, when they did Fatal Attractions, they brought Magneto back as the villain. They figured out, adamantium laced skeleton. He could pull the adamantium out of him and still leave him alive. And that's what happened. So the final shot in this episode of Magneto ripping out Wolverine's adamantium is almost exactly the panel that they drew in the Fatal Attractions issue, which is awesome.
It's a still image that they hang on of it before it goes to black.
Yeah, it's not like one-to-one, but it's definitely like all the tendrils of adamantium and everything. Magneto in the background, Wolverine. Wolverine's facial expression is exactly the same. Great.
Well, and I've always loved the
it's not great, by the way. Not great.
I've always loved the terminology adamantium laced bones, as if someone like just dropped in a couple pinches into the old you laced it, man, it's laced. Yeah. And how it works where as a kid I was like, oh, the bones are coated in adamantium like a chocolate dip. And I guess that's sort of the way it works in this. But really in practice it would be all mixed in and he would be dead.
100%. Peter David was absolutely right there. I also like everybody online has been pointing this out, particularly people who did not read Fatal Attractions or didn't know about this, where they're like, why did they send Wolverine on that team?
Well, that's what my point is like this episode is a great example of Cyclops and Xavier, after just being praised as great fucking leaders, just horrible teaming up of people, horrible. Like Wolverine shouldn't be anywhere near Magneto. Like, what the fuck, man?
Well, That's crazy though. They're all in danger. It's not like Magneto
Yeah,
could
but
kill any.
we just heard about how great they are, and they go into this like the worst thing you could do. But in all these examples, Storm is immediately taken out because she's worried about Forge. It was just like, why are you grouping these people together like this? It's almost like you're saying,
you don't think
worst case.
Couples shouldn't fight together, you're saying? Because they just.
I'm saying there's a smart way to go about things, and then
but
there's
on the
what
other
happened.
hand, they split Jean and Scott apart onto the two separate teams, and the second they did that thing where they're like, goodbye, and they have their hands slowly float away from each other, I was like, oh, one of these characters is going to die.
Definitely. Well, but let me also say about the Magneto Wolverine of it all, like, they're friends with Magneto. He did something, but like he was their like close friend a minute ago in this timeline here. And Wolverine's the one who pushes it over the line and is like, I'm going to kill you with my claws. And Magneto's like, oh yeah? And then he sucks out the juice. So like the metal juice. So I do think
a very nice way to put that.
I think like it was an escalation, but it's not like they made a mistake by sending Wolverine there just because he's.
You shouldn't. If the guy's power is you control metal, don't throw the guy who's got metal bones anywhere near that.
Yes, I understand logically, sure, but I agree with Justin here because up until this point, several seasons of X-Men the Animated Series and the entirety of the season of X-Men 97, he has not done that, so there's no reason for them to be like, Wolverine's going to cross the line, and then Magneto is going to cross the line, but that's exactly what happens.
That's all anyone's doing in this episode. Things are escalated quickly.
But what I love is the way that they draw Magneto in the scene. He's still conflicted about this.
Yeah,
he's really still like, fine, this rivalry is over. I'm going to do this thing that I've held back from doing for years at this point. But he hates it. Like, you feel in his gut that he hates doing this and he doesn't want to do this.
Okay, all right, fine. But what about the moment where it's like, oh, God, we're losing. Then all of a sudden, like, Wolverine gets the helmet off. They've neutralized him. And then Scott comes along and ruins the whole thing. So, like,
He's got to give Jean more time. He's slipping in those jeans.
Miscommunication and the horrible leadership on this team is insane. Like, it drives me nuts. Nobody's on the same page. Everybody's just.
I've got news for you. You should read an X-Men comic book.
I have.
That's the whole thing. But let me also say, it's crazy your order of blame for the adamantium getting sucked out is Cyclops, Professor X, and then Magneto, the person who chose to do it. You blame him third.
Wait, I have a question for you. I want to jump back to something. So there's the scene, Professor Xavier returns. We wake up with him in his totally clean bedroom.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened to his bedroom. His bedroom's fine. He comes out, sees a spike straight through his yellow X-Men chair.
I know.
He's like, oh boy, I'm going to tool around in my wheelchair here. And then Cyclops confronts him with Jean Grey about being gone, about betraying them. Whose side are you on here, Pete?
Coming in hot. I'm never on Cyclops' side. Never on.
So you're on Professor Xavier's side here.
No, I think they're both assholes, and they're fighting like a bunch of just stupid stuff. It's like, man, my
choose
feelings.
One.
No,
one.
My feelings. No, I'm on neither of their side. I hope both of them die horribly. If both of them would just kill each other, we could move on with our lives and put together a team that maybe works with some communication.
How do you even watch this show if you hate the two sort of main characters?
It's hard. This episode was brutal. I watched my favorite character get torn to shreds in a still that just hung.
We'll talk about what's going to happen to him next at the end of the episode. But.
Well, and let me say, I won't spoil it now, but like this period after this moment in Fatal Attractions is one of my favorite Wolverine periods of all time. The reveal that happened at the epilogue of this issue in the comics, I thought was one of the most iconic things in my time reading comics, I feel like, and led to some of the way more interesting Wolverine stories.
Wow.
Visually and from a storytelling perspective.
There is a lot more going on in this episode, though, that we should probably talk about. So we touched a little bit on Professor X returning. let's talk about Roberto and Rogue leaving the team, because that feels like a very big moment. I think we kind of predicted that too, which again, I was like, I feel very smart. But we talked about splitting into multiple X-Men teams. Again, I am not actually smart here. Like, to be clear, this is just logical story progression that's happening in the show. I really liked how they played this out. Roberto felt like, well, we need one more person here.
You didn't 100%. Think it was a little... I felt like Roberto could have been a little like, hey, Jubilee, listen, I'm going to join them. I don't mean this as a slap in your face. He was just like, oh, peace, this team's sick. It's like Jubilee was like, yo, what the fuck? You're just going to bounce? I went to your house when you were like, we can't even have a conversation. That was cold as shit.
Let me ask you a question, Pete. If you had a chance to live on an asteroid, you'd do it, right?
No.
No,
live on an asteroid.
Hate destroyed?
I hate to break it to you, bro. We're already on an asteroid, just hurtling through shit. So, like, I don't want to go to another.
Wait, do you mean Earth?
How high did you get before we did this podcast?
Really, a lot. Yeah,
asteroid high.
Pretty hard.
You're asteroid M high.
Yeah.
I agree. The Rogue thing, perfectly justified, made sense. Love the choice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Roberto, I was like, what? You're signing on to this?
Yeah. It was out of nowhere.
You need another flying character.
He was like,
it's the first time
he was on the ground, you couldn't get that shot.
First time we see him full use his powers, I was like, oh, cool. Weird choice. Time to do it. Also, he's like, I don't want to reveal that I'm a mutant. He's like, I'll just go with the most evil terrorist guy.
Ever. Yeah,
a lot of media coverage coming my way.
Yeah, like what the heck is going on, man?
I did like the fight, though, particularly how they played that out. Rogue being like, we're playing for keeps, versus Roberto being like, I'm sorry, Jubilee, and then getting tricked by Jubilee. It was janky to get there, but it played out nicely.
I agree. A couple other things there, like the lead up to that. First off, like Rogue talking to Professor X, and she's like, she wants to say something like sort of poignant about Gambit, and she's like, Remy was the most Cajun man she's ever met. I was like, what? What is that? It sounds like you're like, man, those crabs were so good. Like, they were so flavorful.
Crawfish boil.
Yeah, he's the most Cajun man she ever met because he's blackened and crispy.
Yeah, it was.
She was just like, did you see his half shirts? Oh, that's Cajun.
Very strange.
That's spicy.
That's a spicy. I also like from there when we see I like that Magneto's like, I'm gonna go visit the X-Men. I'll bring my Stroid. I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna have it. I was like, oh, cool. It's like that's like his Winnebago, in a way, just rolling up, which was funny. And also, like, he's back in the classic evil costume. I think the world would be a better place if we all had our good guy clothes and our bad guy clothes, and we should just wear whichever one we're feeling. They're like, oh shit, don't that hoodie? That's Pete's evil Magneto. His good guy hoodie just has a big P on the front because that's like Magneto.
Trial of Pete was one of my favorite issues, by the way.
Oh man, ongoing.
Yes, that was great. I did really like Magneto. Whose side are you on at this point? Because this is another big discussion point on the internet, particularly after Val Cooper saying Magneto was right the last episode. I think it's pretty clear in world that Magneto is the villain and Professor Xavier is the good guy. We've talked about this before. It's different in terms of how you think about it in the real world, but in the cartoon world, particularly the actions of Magneto this episode, err on the side of villainy, I would say. But how do you guys feel?
Agreed.
Well, I will say, though, Professor X is like, oh, he got his helmet off, I'll control his brain and do it that way. I was like, that's a pretty evil choice.
That's his only option, though. That's his power. That's the only thing he can do to stop him. It's not like he's got other options.
I'm just saying.
He can't, punch him in the face or something.
I'll throw out another option just while I'm throwing out internet discussion things. Why doesn't Morph do it? Like, Morph, as we've talked about, clearly morphs into people that has the powers of folks. Why doesn't he just reverse the poles?
I loved when he turned into Hulk. That was awesome.
Very cool.
Very fun.
But don't you think, though, and it is strange that we've got this sort of like a Cajun seasoning of Morph being very more powerful than we would expect. Mm-hmm. But the fact that it hasn't been justified,
would you say
there's
Morph's
no way.
the most Morpheus guy you ever met?
Yeah, I honestly think he's more Cajun than Gambit.
Wow. Shots fired.
Can we go down all the characters and rank them by Cajun-ness?
But how do you guys rank stuff? I'm always like, well, favorite? No, most Cajun is what I think. Like when I was thinking about like, who do I want to marry?
Nightcrawler's
well, I'm going to marry
Cajun.
the most Cajun woman I have out there.
Now that we're thinking about it, I would say Nightcrawler's pretty Cajun.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to say is, I actually don't remember now that I think about it. I've been overspiced.
You've been overseas.
Oh, the morph stuff. I feel like he can't be as powerful and as good at it as Magneto, and just be like, "Oh, you fix it," and he just snaps his fingers and do it. That's crazy.
I feel like I read something, and I don't know where this is sourced from, so I don't know how true this is, but he could, maybe this was they were theorizing, but like that he can get the powers of other folks, but it's just internal in his body. He can't do external powers, so he can't do like Magneto's magnetism, but he can get Hulk's strength, for example. But I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some explanation there. I don't think the show is going to do it because it moves at such a crazy pace, but I would appreciate it personally.
If there was, what we need is the Wizard magazine style breakdown of all these powers.
We do need that.
Because here's what it is.
Magazine, you left us too soon.
What I bet it is like when he becomes the Hulk, he has the same musculature of the Hulk because he is morphing into that. And we should actually say, like, Morph does use they, them pronouns. We should be using those as well.
Yes.
So they can take on the musculature of that, and so in essence have the Hulk's power, but and create a hardened sword when you're playing Ilyana. But I don't think like having.
Well, if that's true, then Morph needs to start making better choices because he's the Hulk. You should just start thunderclapping everybody and just like take care of business. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would throw out there, I really liked the classic costumes that we got in the episode as well.
Yeah.
The Morph costume was great. I like the Wolverine costume. What do you think about the rest of them? I don't know if we needed the Marvel Girl costume necessarily.
Agree. And like as far as some of the other, like Cable, his costume is just holding a gun at all times. Like in the middle when they're just hanging out when they're sort of like, you're a modest goddess, like having fun, and he's just standing there holding like a jacked up wicked gun. I was like, dude, set it down. You're with your friends.
Yeah. What did you think? We also got I thought, great joke, a response joke to the 2000 X-Men movie. There was the classic line, the conversation between Wolverine and Cyclops, where Wolverine's like kind of itching around with his costume. And he's like, you guys really wear this stuff out. And Cyclops says, would you prefer yellow spandex? Yeah. So here we get the reverse of that, where he throws Cable the costume, and Cable's like, you guys wear this outside. He's like, would you prefer black leather? Fun stuff.
It's good.
Yeah, that was fun. What do you think about the kind of like father-son moment there with Cable and Cyclops?
I love that. I love everything that's going on with Jean Grey and Cyclops and Cable, because I just think it gets to that core of like, this is the weirdest possible family dynamic you could possibly imagine, which is like core to X-Men stuff.
And it's played on Cyclops, the most like straight arrow, like gonna drink a big glass of milk with every meal. And he's like, my son's in the future is a robot. He's here. My wife's a different clone. Oh no. And like, I love when he's talking to Professor X and his polo is tucked in so hard.
It's a
I
hard
was like,
tuck.
untuck
That's a
that
hard
polo,
tuck,
guy.
bro.
It's a hard tuck. I bet
That's
he's
a
got
hard
like
tuck.
reverse suspenders just locking that in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
like
yeah.
suspenders
When
that go
you
down
say
your-
reverse suspenders, everybody knows what you mean. You know,
yeah, like
because
suspenders that
that's
are
super
pulling
clear.
your shirt down to your feet, like stirrups. You know what I'm talking about?
You
Garters?
talking about a belt?
Suspenders.
You
Are you
talking about a belt?
garters?
It's sort of a guard, a reverse suspender though, because it's not holding your pants up; it's holding your shirt down. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I just
So
made
you're
this
talking
up.
about.
I'm going to sell these.
Oh, okay, great. So it's. I don't. So it's like a bar on the inside of the clothes. Is that what you're saying?
You know how suspenders like they're up here.
Right.
So it's like suspenders that are down below but pulling down. And
What
so
are they
like,
attached to? What
your
are they?
ankles. Your ankles.
Oh wow! Oh, so
Socks? Or directly to your ankles.
Yep, there. It's a bone graft. It's an adamantium bone
Wow.
graft.
this is
Magneto could have
intense.
disrupt. Magneto's going to untuck Cyclops' shirt, and it's just as devastating as Wolverine.
You know, for the first
We're
30
not to our
seconds,
vision board yet.
I was ready to invest in this, but now I'm not.
Well, what stopped you? The bone graft.
The bone graft. Yep.
It could be a loose cuff around your ankle.
Oh, could it? Could it be a loose cuff?
A loose cuff.
Who's going to choose bone over loose cuff is my question.
Depends on how tucked you want to be. How tucked? Hashtag how tucked, Pete.
Random thing to throw out there, but this is definitely like getting my comic book sense tingling where I realized like, oh, they have all of these mutants here so they can split them into the X-Men Blue and X-Men Gold team, which I don't know why you call them that in the continuity of the show, but it was definitely, I was like, eee, when that happened. Just really enjoyed it. That's all. That's my whole point.
Well, technically, it would be like the X-Men colors are blue and yellow, but they were like the yellow team is not. You don't throw that around, so it's too much like Pete. It's a Pete team, and so it's
That's not. No, it's the classic Reservoir Dogs conversation where nobody wants to be Mr. Pink. Everybody wants, that's that whole thing.
How do we feel about Mister Sinister in this episode? Because two things I'll throw out there. Love the
2
moment
seconds
when
he was
Morph,
in there?
What? Love the moment when Morph pretends to be Mister Sinister, because when he ran in to be like, Bastion, the X-Men are stopping us, I was like, that doesn't feel like Mister Sinister at all. And then it wasn't. And that was great. But at the same time, he seems to be a symbiote, sort of just like gooping around all over the place. And I don't know about that. I don't love it.
Well, he is goopy. What I like about it is that he's a slithering shadow. He's a little bit more horror, and that's what I've been missing from Mister Sinister this season. Is he's just like a lab assistant most of the time for Bastion, and he should be like more have an edge to him. Like, for God's sakes, he's the guy that brings in his nasty boys when he wants to commit crimes. And when he's got those nasty boys, he's going to be slithering around.
Pete, how do you feel about Mister Sinister?
It's just such a non-factor. It's weird because he's usually a final boss, so it's weird to see him be like an assistant to a boss. So I don't know, man. He wasn't in this episode, if you ask me.
To your point, Pete, I think in the final episode there will be more.
Yeah, and
I'm
I think
sure
they're going to beat Bastion, not to jump ahead, but I think like they're going to beat Bastion, but Mister Sinister will be ongoing, because seeing him be like, the final piece of my plan was Cable happens to be here, so I corrupted him, and now he's going to kill Jean Grey. I guess that was my plan. Like, I think I'm paraphrasing the line, but he says like, the accidental test tube that I created is finally here, and I'm like, what? What were you doing? You're just doing random things to kind of see what happens.
I will say it would have been easier for him to own Cable being there. Like, of course, the prodigal son has returned as I predicted. Like, easy thing for him to expect, and then he doesn't have to be weird about it.
Right, but he's just kind of ongoing. Like, he's just the villain who is always there in the background, I think.
Well, and like while we're talking about like Bastion, the way that he is like gone from like scary good villain in this episode, he's like, I'm just gonna make some old shitty Sentinels. Maybe that'll work this time. I'm like, that's your move? You don't have electricity, no power, so you're gonna make the dumb ones?
I do. There's two details I like about it. I agree with you, but one, I loved the line where he takes his mom's prone body because they've shut down the Prime Sentinels, and he, again, paraphrasing, but he's like, it's finally quiet.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot. I thought Theo James, who
cool.
does the voice, played that very nicely. I also like the fact that I think it was Eric Bauza was doing the voice of the Sentinels in the Master Mold. This episode, it was Theo James because they're all Bastion. So
Yeah.
that's just like a little detail that I thought was a nice bit there, because you could have brought in Eric Bauza to the Sentinels. And actually, just to throw out a bonus one, this continues to lead into anime stuff, like the whole Bastion lying there attached to a million tentacles and then creating like tentacle parts with hands and things. It feels so anime to me.
Yeah.
It's good. I like it.
It's because you like that tentacle porn stuff.
I do. I love hentai. It's called hentai.
Oh, my bad, dude. Sorry about
Respect.
that. Yeah,
Big
yeah.
respect.
Yeah. My bad.
Pete, what's your favorite part about hentai?
No, well, I want to talk about how the fact that, Magneto told Charles to shut the fuck up. That was a real fun moment where he was just like, shut up.
I thought about you.
Shut up. It was so
Did you
glorious.
feel seen in that moment where he's like,
Yes.
two
I was like,
words
"Thank
I've
you."
always wanted to say to it was like, ooh, what are the two words going to be?
I agree. I love that moment too. And also, like, this show is so Magneto.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, the way that it's like Professor X about to monologize and he's like, shut the fuck up. It's like, yo, okay.
Also, Beast doing that like giant slap move was pretty awesome.
Yeah, what's the sound of one hand clapping? It's ridiculous.
I was like, get out.
With the five fingers say the face, he was just like, plow. That was awesome.
I was like, Spider-Man energy coming off Beast. Not here for it.
Yeah, you just don't like Beast in this show.
He just doesn't. I think he could be used fine, but he's always the odd character out, and he's like the energy, the drama, the emotionality. He to me is like just a totally different flavor, and he's the raisin in your oatmeal in this, and I don't like it.
He's a square. There you go.
Yeah.
Any other moments from the episode we should call out?
Yes. The Magneto building a Sentinel throne. Even in the most dire circumstances, he got to do some interior design, and he wanted to make it nice. He wanted to make it have a point. So shouts to him. The line that we've talked about in our Patreon Slack, mind your weather your mind. I was like, okay, trying a little bit here. You feel a little bit of the grit and the muscle on that one, but like, I thought it was cool. I thought it worked.
It really worked for me in the moment, and then immediately it was just like a tumult of thoughts that were going through my head, because it's cool. The relationship between Storm and Jean Grey is great.
Yeah.
Particularly as a payoff for everything Storm has been through over the season and Jean Grey has been through over the season. Also really, really good. But it had big, what's the line? What is grief but love?
Yeah. From WandaVision.
Yeah. It felt a little like that. And then the thing that undercut it was there were multiple other moments where characters just kind of reversed what other characters were saying, particularly when Xavier and Magneto were talking, where I was like, maybe this is just a verbal take of the writer. I don't know. But.
Yeah.
Speaking of like Magneto talking, I thought his kind of like villain monologue about seeing that kid kind of like vaporized in front of him was pretty cool. Yeah, I thought that was a nice. I really felt like the show is paying attention to itself and kind of really using the things to affect, people in a good way. I thought it was really kind of cool and smart.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I also thought that monologue was fantastic and very upsetting, as it's meant to be. Are we going to get any clarification about how Magneto got out of that? Because if he's talking about watching Leech get vaporized, how did Magneto survive?
I mean, I doubt we'll get it. If I had to guess, he saw that he was also knocked away but not killed and then found by Bastion, if anything. Or he was purposefully saved by Bastion for the purpose of this plot going forward. But like it's interesting. Like I think the show is really positioning Professor X, Cyclops, and the X-Men as an organization as like not caught up with the times, and so Magneto is like he's like the current one. But I don't think we're going to end there, and this is sort of getting into more vision boardy stuff. But I feel like Magneto is going to go too far, and we saw that with the Wolverine move. Magneto was right. He's the hero for the times. But then he steps over the line, and now it's up to Professor X. Take off your bug hat and get ready to catch up and be the hero that actually needs to rise to this moment.
I agree with Justin. Magneto is like super hip, and he's like the young kind of like, yeah, he's fresh. Like when Rogue joined the team, he was like, "Say less, Queen." You know what I mean? I was like, wow, he gets it. He gets it. This guy's got his finger on the pulse.
Yeah, everyone wants to live in Stroid.
Stroid light.
Anything else before we move over to speculation, Pete?
Yeah, I really thought that the execution of action towards the end of this episode was just insane. Like the amount of stuff that was just like, oh shit, Madeline dies, like like all this stuff goes down in this crazy fight sequence where you're just kind of like, when those end credit hits, it's always like, oh, like this end of this roller coaster where you're like, I want to go again. So, yeah, really impressive, the speed at which we're kind of flying through stuff and how it's hitting.
I wanted to call out two Forge moments really quick.
I was about to bring up some Forge stuff.
The Forge and Storm posing on the roof when Jubilee and Roberto are cornered in the alleyway, the same alleyway they were in before. Very cool. Also followed up by a great moment of Jubilee just sobbing and being like, "Storm, you're back," which I was like, clutching my pearls, to use.
Yeah, there we go.
And
Pete got us all
the other thing, when Beast is like, "How's your leg working?" and Forge's line, "Thought about it." Great. Like, just so much restraint in writing that line, because I was like, there needs to be a second part of that line, but you actually don't need one. And just leaving it that, I thought was fantastic.
Well, in the same way that this show loves Magneto, this show loves Forge. Because I was like, why are we giving Forge time to flex on his leg battery design?
Yeah.
And we get that moment. I was like, okay.
One thing that was kind of driving me a little crazy was it was like, they were kind of like in the episode, oh, it's 12 hours till the end of the world. And then like someone was like, yeah, 1 hour. I was like, wait, what? We're down to one? Like I know Justin loves the countdown clock, but it would have been nice to know they were throwing numbers all over the place. And I was like, well,
I do appreciate they didn't do my least favorite thing, which is a actual countdown clock where somebody is like 12 hours until the world dies and it counts down to 1 minute. And you're like, that's not actually how that works. It's not exactly 12 hours. Come on.
Yeah. And I think they all took like a 6 to 7 hour nap, so they were rested up.
Gotta be rested.
Oh, man. That's the first thing you do when you have 12 hours to live. You're like, I got to get a nap in so I can really enjoy this 12.
Well, and the other thing is like Cyclops takes a while to get into his outfit because he has to take off his reverse suspenders.
Right. And just to jump back to Pete's point, the famous expression is take 6 to enjoy 12.
Exactly.
Right.
We all know that. Yeah.
Famous. What do you mean by famous? Is that like,
it's famous.
Define famous.
A lot
You're
of
talking like Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, Brad Pitt was saying it on the set of Bullet Train a lot.
Oh, good. Bullet Train.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. Obviously the most renowned Brad Pitt feature film.
Vehicle, yeah.
The one, if anyone were like, Brad Pitt, oh, I love him in Bullet Train is the most likely was going to
it's on Netflix. Any other points before we move on to...
Did you want to plug any more Netflix shows, Alex, before we move on? Or are you cool with just doing
check out Bod Kid.
All right.
Will Forte. I love Will Forte. He's great.
Okay, cool.
All right. Why don't we move on to our vision board where we talk about what's coming forward. We've teased this a lot. I am going to get into some stuff that I'm pretty sure is coming forward just based on here's where we were in the comics and we're moving forward to that.
We get one more episode in this season?
one
Yes.
more episode of the season, season finale. In terms of the Bastion stuff and the Mister Sinister stuff, not 100% sure. In terms of the Fatal Attraction stuff, after Wolverine gets his skeleton ripped out, the next thing that happens is there is an entire issue where he is near death. He nearly dies because the adamantium, of course, had been run out of him. He ultimately recovers because of his healing factor. And the next thing that happens that I don't know if they're going to get into, but he becomes what's called feral Wolverine. Is this the thing that you were talking about, Justin?
No.
That you loved?
No,
Okay.
no.
What's the thing that you loved?
It's the thing that after all that happens and he heals up, and there's a whole Wolverine crash cart that and he goes into his head. Is him? He's sitting by the pond at the X Mansion, and with Jubilee, I believe, and everyone assumes that the adamantium's gone, his claws are gone, and that's when he pops his bone claws for the first time, revealing that he isn't just a healing factor based mutant. There's a Wolverine, there's a claw thing. And so that's a huge revelation for him. It opens up all this other exploration about Wolverine's past, where you go earlier than the Weapon X program. That gets us to Origin and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I thought you.
And
Origin.
I love that. It's sort of like Wolverine's, to use a Captain America analogy, his nomad period, where he wanders, he's weaker, he loses fights more, he gets his bone claws broken, and then when he pops them, they're like bent and fucked up, and I was like, oh, this is getting gnarly. And it's just, to me, it's my favorite Wolverine because he is less able to just throw himself into shit and get burned to nothing.
But what if they do from the comics where when Wolverine dies, the story where when he has to go to hell and fight somebody to get...
Yes. So there's two things off this for anybody who's listening. One, other than the stuff Justin is talking about, the other thing that happens is they establish that his healing factor was dealing with the adamantium in his skeleton.
Yeah.
And when he doesn't have that anymore, he can become his true, best, most evolved form, which is basically like a dog who lives in the woods who has no nose. And I don't know if that was an artistic choice or he evolved to have no nose, but he's like running around and barking, licking Cyclops and stuff. It's insane. The thing that happens further on that Pete's talking about is they establish that every time Wolverine dies or almost dies, he goes to a limbo dimension where he fights a dude not named Azrael. I think it's like Lazar or something.
Yeah.
It's the letters reversed, with a big sword. And if he beats him, he gets to come back to life. Both of those things are insane, and I hope they don't do them.
I don't think we'll get that in this season, but great standalone episode for next season.
Other thing, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I 100% think we're going to get this, is I think we are going to get the other thing that happens in Fatal Attractions, which is Professor X gets so furious about Magneto ripping out the adamantium that he shuts down Magneto's mind. That leaves Magneto comatose on, in that case, it's another name, it's some other base, but it's basically Asteroid M, with, in that case, Colossus taking care of him. Here, I think it's going to be Rogue taking care of him. That's where we're going to leave them at the end. But it also allows the bad thoughts from Magneto to sneak into Xavier's head and create a mind baby that ultimately grows up to be Onslaught, this unstoppable villain. And I kind of think we're going to get that.
I don't want a mind baby, dude.
We have, well, be careful then. You got to be careful. Use mind protection, Pete, or else you're going to make a mind baby. I don't think we will get that gestured to in this next episode, but if that's what next season is about, we will see it in a moment in this episode, I bet.
Well, I think
we'll see because in the
we'll
comics,
see like Xavier and then a flash of Onslaught or something like that.
And you'll see like a little like dark spot, I think, because I think that's how it was in the comics. It was like just a little like little thing.
I think, and then last episode we're going to get them dealing with Madeline's death as well as what kind of shape Wolverine's in.
Well, and I also think we Cable has come here and is just sort of a regular X-Man now, in the same way that Bishop was in the front half of the season, but we haven't actually done any time travel stuff. So my prediction is like we've also seen Apocalypse in the opening credits of like half of the episodes here.
Yeah.
And we saw it in this episode. I think we're going to be setting up Apocalypse as a villain for next season, and we're going to get some amount of actual time travel here.
In terms of the time travel, I will throw out there, not to call out who we talked about at the beginning of the episode, but Bo DeMeo has been giving people homework, episodes and things to check out or read before the next episode. Beyond the X-Men stuff that he called out for the finale, he also mentioned Cause and Effect, a classic episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, which was a time loop episode.
Yes.
We've already had Cable mention time loops. So I kind of think we're going to go back there. Like, I think we're going to go back at the very least to the Genosha time loop and see how many times he tried that. I don't know if it's going to tie into the action with Bastion and Magneto, but I think we're going to get that as well.
Because do you think then, like, this episode is like a Cable episode?
Maybe.
Where we're flashing back, and then it's all about him coming to this moment, and maybe he's the hero here.
It could be. I feel like that would give short shrift to Wolverine because I think we need to see him fighting for his life and ultimately getting past it with the bone claws, like you're saying. So maybe it's both of them. Like maybe it's half and half.
It might be a long episode as well, because I also think another area is the Mister Sinister stuff. I think because another thing that's been in the opening credits for maybe the whole season is Morph running from Sinister, and it feels like that needs to be something as well.
Yeah, I agree. And at the same time, we got to wrap up all the Bastion stuff. I do think that will be wrapped up in some fashion at the end of the episode.
Oh, yeah,
so
definitely.
Lots of stuff.
I think that's just going to be wrecking Sentinels the whole time and then eventually Bastion.
So excited. This show is great. I'm having a good time.
100%.
If you'd like to support this show, this podcast, and all the shows we do, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We'd love to chat with you about X-Men 97, Apple, Spotify, Android, or the app of your choice. To subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter/X, Comic Book Club Live on TikTok and Instagram, comicbookclublive.com. For this podcast and many more, until next time, stay marvelous.
Keep your reverse suspenders pulled down.
Tuck it.
Destroy the life.